Hi there, how are you? In the latest videos I have been talking a lot about the history of Taekwondo and Karate. How old is really Taekwondo and Karate? How ancient is really those martial art? Can we trust what we read in some of the books of the ancient warriors many thousand years ago practicing Karate or Taekwondo? Hang in there and I will let you know. Hi, I'm Henrik. I'm the founder of Sangrok, Norway, and in this video, as I told you, we'll talk a little bit more about the history of particularly Karate and Taekwondo, and if they really are that old and have this long heritage that you can read about in some of the books. 10 or 15 years ago, I read this really cool book about the samurai in the 15th century. It was really well written, and it was all about the samurai and the life he had with his wife. But in the last chapter, it ruined everything for me, because in that book, he said that he was going to test for his 6th dan with his master. And the dan system is not that old at all. That was introduced by Jidokwan in our century around 1900. So that ruined actually the book for me, because I cannot stand reading books with wrong historical information. In some of the Taekwondo books I have behind me here, it says that Taekwondo isn't many thousand-year ancient Korean martial art and was practiced by the Hwarang, some of the warriors of old Korea. And you know what? This is not right at all. We don't know what kind of martial art the Hwarang was actually doing, and if they were practicing martial art, it was probably swords, spears, things like that, because the fighting with fists against each other was looked a little bit down on. It was like the middle class was doing. So Hwarang never practiced Taekwondo at all, and Taekwondo is not many thousand years old. I also have some books about Japanese karate. Is karate actually Japanese? And in some of these books it says that the samurai was practicing karate for their combat without weapons. It ain't true. The samurai didn't practice karate. Karate is not that old. So, if it isn't that ancient, and if Taekwondo was not practiced by old warriors of Korea and karate was not practiced by old samurais, what is the real truth? Well, of course, this martial art has a tradition that is maybe many thousand years old. But the name karate came in 1935. There was a big meeting with the masters of the Okinawan martial art, and they came together and they agreed upon a common name for their arts, and they called it karate. And that was actually the martial art that came from Okinawa. Of course, at that time Okinawa was a Japanese island, but before that, long time back in history, Okinawa was an own kingdom, and they got their martial art from China, and they transferred it and developed it, and it became the Okinawan martial art system that was later called karate, and that was first in 1935. So what about Taekwondo? It is said in some of the books that they found the carving in the stone in caves, and the Hwarang many thousand years was practicing Taekwondo. It ain't true. Taekwondo got its name in 1955. There was then a meeting with a lot of pioneers in martial art in Korea, and most of these martial artists had been practicing karate in Japan during the occupation of Korea. And they made different systems that they called Kwan. They came together to find one name that could promote the Korean martial art better, and they came up with Taekwondo. Also, in some of the books I have, it says that Taekwondo originated from the old Korean martial art called Taekyon, because we see that Korea had an old martial art called Taekyon, and it was more or less dancing like with a lot of kicks. But Taekwondo has nothing to do with Taekyon. But the name Taekwondo, they agreed on that it could sound a little bit similar with Taekyon, so then they could get that link. But that link is not for real. It is a forgery of history, actually. Korean martial art like Taekwondo came from Japan. The karate in Japan, they came from Okinawa. The martial art in Okinawa came from China. So where did the martial art in China come from? Probably it had a lot of influence from the Mongols, because the Mongols was riding around in China. We can also see, maybe, that is just a theory, that Alexander the Great, he brought with him some of the fighting art of the Western, and that can have also influenced the way they were practicing martial art in the Far East. I think it is very sad to see when you search the internet that they are making this bullshit history out of it, and even at the federation, the different world federation, they are claiming this long heritage, and they are very nationalistic about their martial art. I think it's very sad, because these days when we have so much information from the internet, it is easy to see that this is not right at all. So why don't be honest? Taekwondo got his name in 55. Karate got his name in 1935. Of course, now Taekwondo has a lot of Korean culture adopted into the martial arts. So Taekwondo is a Korean martial art, but the roots is in karate. But if you say to a Japanese that karate is not Japanese, he will be probably angry with you or don't understand what you're talking about. Why don't see the truth that the karate came from Okinawa, that got their influence from China, and also the other countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, because the Okinawa was like a melting pot of the Asian culture because of their where they were situated, and there was a lot of trade and culture exchange in Okinawa. Okinawa was a melting pot and a trade center, so of course they got influenced by very many cultures. After reading about the history of Okinawa, there was also actually a Korean settlers there, and they did martial art, but they didn't do anything like Taekwondo at all. They did wrestling, because in the ancient Korea, wrestling was very popular, and that was probably came from the Mongols again. And I don't think the Mongols even invented the martial art, because they probably got their influence from other places. So I know I'm repeating myself through all of my videos, because this subject I've been talking a lot about, but it's very important for me because I really like to dive into the history. I like to see the truth. And the truth is that you cannot find one origin. There is not like one country that has invented the martial art. It is a result of culture exchange, war. So they had to find the best way to defend themselves, and a lot of traveling. And all of this has happened in Southeast Asia, that has formed and been like the birth of what is today called karate and taekwondo and other style in the same way. I hope you found this interesting. Of course, you can practice your martial art for as long as you want and without actually having any interest in the history. But if you have interest in the history and looking back, I think it's important to know the real history, because these Korean and Japanese books of the martial art, they are colored by nationalism, and there is a lot of historical lies in those books. So why don't we call it what it is? And in that way, I think also Taekwondo in these days, yes, now it is a Korean martial art, but it's not any less good if they admit that it came from karate. And today, yes, karate is a Japanese martial art. It got influenced by a Japanese culture, but it was not born or started in Japan. I think it is better to see the history in a neutral way, and in that way we can look further and we can develop it even further too. But let's not live on a lie. So why has all this lying and rewriting of the history, why has this happened? And I think you also have to look at a history to understand that. First of all, if you see the Korean martial art, and the most known is like Taekwondo and Hapkido, and they all have roots in Japan and Okinawa. But Japan was occupying Korea for 50 years, and that does something with people. So there was a need to have their own martial art and to make a distance from Japan. So it's not that strange that this history and new written myths about the martial art came. And also with the Japanese karate, Japan was not that fond of China, and actually karate was meaning Chinese hand, but they changed it because kara could also mean empty. So they tried to take away all of the Chinese heritage and make it a true Japanese martial art. And this is nationalism, folks. And the good thing about being a Westerner, I don't need to take any part in this conflict, if you can call it a conflict. But I love my Taekwondo and I love martial arts in general, and I like to practice it, and I'm very interested in what is the true history. And another thing, history is always written by the winners, so you can never even trust the normal history books. Of course, all kinds of fighting. We as human, we have been fighting since the day we learned to stand on 2 feet. And a little bit joke, but if you imagine 2 people living in each cave, and you wanted to conquer your neighbor, you knew that if I practice hitting with my club a little bit more than my neighbor, I will probably take him down. And of course, that is the start of practicing some kind of martial art. Same with a Norwegian Viking, my heritage. Of course, they were practicing the sword before they went out on their rides. So they have to practice to be better fighters. And in that way, there also was like a system, a school to learn how to fight better. Us humans always have needed to defend ourselves or to be better to attack. So you can find some martial art in all kinds of countries and cultures. What is the common thing about the Taekwondo, Karate, and the Southeast Asian martial art? And that is the influence from the Buddhism or the Zen Buddhism. I think the philosophy that is like a fundament for the Southeast Asian martial art is what makes them quite similar and special from, for example, Western boxing, Greek-Roman wrestling, Viking fighting, and so on. Why is it so important to me to expose this lies, and why is it so important to me as a Taekwondo practitioner to tell that Taekwondo came from Karate, Karate came from Okinawa, and so on and so on? Why shouldn't I back up and promote Taekwondo in the way that many of the leaflets and the books is written? And that is very simple. I don't like to live on a lie, and I think to really understand the history is so important when you want to do an effort to develop things even further. So keep an honest and open mind actually will help me learn more about my martial art. And because I have been practicing Taekwondo and Hapkido for almost 40 years now, that has taken me to Korea many times. I've been there altogether more than 2 years. So I love Korea. I love the Korean culture, and I also love the influence they had on their martial art. So it's not for me to look down on Japan or Korea. I just want to, let's call it what it is. If you found this interesting, please press the like button, leave a comment, and give me a suggestion to what I can have in the next video. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video. Bye.